In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Earlier, we talked about the two ways or two theories or two concepts of conversation, which we began on page 23. If you actually come back to page 23, you can see there are two approaches. One was the one that we talked about on page 24, and it was exchange structure. Last week, or in fact in the previous presentations, we actually dealt with exchange structure on page 24 and 5. And finally, we made something like page 26, which a lesson would look something like the diagram on page 26. And we gave examples, different examples of the different kinds of exchange structures happening in classrooms. The number one, doctor-patient exchange. Number 3 was interviews. Okay, and number 4 was trials, and number 5 maybe the TV quiz shows actually are on the television appear to be like this. Now we want to go to conversation analysis on page 27. Down there on page 27, we have number 2, conversation analysis. What was number 1? Number 1 was exchange structure on page 24. Well, the approach taken by conversation analysis is the opposite of the approach taken by conversation exchange structure. Why? Because conversation analysis has its own criticism of, in fact, IRFs that we had on page 26. Page 26, we had IRFs, okay? They say not all types of, in fact, conversations appear to be something like number 1, I, initiation, number 2, response, and number 3, follow-up, IRF. Well, let us begin the second approach. Page 27, 4 lines to the bottom. Well, line 3 to the bottom says, the exchange structure approach looked at discourse as a predetermined sequence. Okay? It was decided about this type, decided about it already in fact, our analysis. Okay? It was something like predetermined sequence. Well, before I go to the classroom, I know that I want to have something like initiation, response by the student, and follow-up by the teacher. Okay? I already know this is the structure of something like a classroom activity by the teacher. So, conversation analysis says no. Real conversations are not predetermined, and there is no such a sequence like the classroom activity, like the teacher-patient, like the doctor-patient exchange, like let's say interviews, for example, a job interview, or trials in the courts. Okay? Well, in the real conversations, everything is quite different. Let us begin with it. Line 2 says, it started with the theory of patterning of units. Well, we are still talking about IRFs and exchange structure, and we say that, well, That theory started with a patterning of units and showed how what people say fits the model. Okay. Well, what is the process? What is it like? It is like viewing conversation as a kind of product. But conversation analysis looks at it like a process, not a product. What is the difference between a product and a process? If you go to a supermarket, if you go to a department store, if you go to a shop, different types of shops, no difference. You see different types of things are available for you. Different types of commodities are available for you. Okay? For example, if you go to a supermarket, you can find, let's say, oil, let's say macaroni, let's say, I don't know, mayonnaise, etc., etc. These are already produced, so they are products. Okay, they are available as like something that already, in fact, processed, and now they are available for the customers to use. But conversation is not like a supermarket. It's like a factory, not like a supermarket. What is the difference between a supermarket and a factory? In the supermarket, you have different types of products. In a factory, you see that things are produced one after another. So, let us see, for example, the factory makes tomato paste. Okay, tomato paste. Or a ketchup. So there are, in fact, bottles to be filled or cans to be filled by these types of things. So one can after another, etc., etc. Well, the point is that conversation analysis looks at the conversation like a process. Okay? I am talking to you, you're talking to me. Okay, it's a conversation. But exchange structure says something like the way I am just talking, the teacher teaching you. Okay, IRF. So I teach. Okay, then I ask you questions. Of course, we don't have it online here available for you. So if you have got questions, you go to WhatsApp, let's say. But the teacher is like this, IRF. But the conversation, no, it is not. So on page 28, it says something like this. On the other hand, conversation analysis is bottom up, not top down. Exchange structure looked at everything like top down. We already know that this is the structure. We go to the classroom, you see that. The classroom looks like exchange structure. But in a conversation between friends, between family members, between everybody, it's something like bottom up. We don't know what is what, okay? We just actually put things together and the result is a kind of conversation. This is the real conversation. So line 2 says it lets the data dictate its own structure. Unlike the teacher. The teacher wants to know what he actually is teaching. Okay? But in a conversation, this is not something that is there. So we actually begin the data like whatever we want to say without, in fact, teaching, transacting. There is a kind of exchange, transacting, interchange. Okay? So, line 2 continues to say CA, conversation analysis, looks at conversation as a linear ongoing event. Linear is like a line. One thing after another thing after the next one, etc., etc. It's linear, and ongoing, okay, that unfolds little by little. Okay, when we continue, we understand what is going to be happening in our conversation. And implies the negotiation of cooperation between speakers. So I want to cooperate with you, you want to cooperate with me. So there's a kind of negotiation of cooperation. We work together in order to, in fact, have something like a conversation between friends. The friends actually are going to help each other, negotiating and cooperating. Thus, viewing a conversation as a kind of process, like factory. In a factory, actually, you see that, for example, milk is bottled. One after another, there is milk, and the milk is bottled. Or the drink, the Coca-Cola, I don't know, the Pepsi-Cola or 7-Up, is actually one after another is bottled. And you see everything like that. Okay? So this is the way actually conversation analysis looks at conversation. This is the opposite of what we actually considered as exchange structure. Well, so line 1, 2, 3, 4 says that CAE differs too in its methodology. Conversation analysis is different from its methodology from discourse analysis. Whereas discourse analysis takes the concepts and terms of linguistics and then examines their role in real data, conversation analysis as a kind of discourse analysis. Okay? Conversation analysis takes real data. Okay? Text is something like a book, already decided, written. Okay? But the conversation is live. Okay? مباشر, حي, alive. Okay? It's like this. So, discourse analysis studies something done in the past, but conversation analysis actually works on this process of, well, friends talking to each other, etc., etc. So, it takes a real data and then examines the language and demonstrates conversation and demonstrates that conversation is systematically structured. Okay, again we have something like IRFs here, but this is hayy, this is alive, it is mubashir. Okay, unlike exchange structure, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, both CA and discourse analysis are approaches that have evolved over the last decades and are very much alive today. Well, actually, they are alive and everybody actually uses these types of things in his or her analysis. Language teachers are actually concerned and they are concerned and they like to actually work on conversation analysis among their students, okay, to see what kind of structures they have. Okay, anyway, the new paragraph on page 28 actually begins by defining what a conversation is and what is not, okay? And it says, let us start by defining conversation. Well, the same line goes, conversation is discourse mutually constructed and negotiated in time between speakers. Okay? Easy for you to understand. It is negotiated between the different types of speakers and mutually constructed. It means that if there is one person, we don't have conversation. we need at least two people. That's why we use mutually constructed, made by at least two guys. It is usually informal, well, and unplanned. Okay? It is the opposite of exchange structure. First of all, the teacher wants to be more formal than informal, more formal than the informal conversations. Number two, there we have lesson plans. Here we don't have lesson plans or something like this. In our conversation, we don't have any kind of planning. We actually talk and talk and talk until we actually say goodbye to each other. That is a difference. So it is unplanned. For lessons, we have lesson plans. For conversations, we do not have conversation plans. Okay? Of course, there are two types of lesson plans there. Something written before the teacher goes to the class, or sometimes actually experienced teachers are like this, that just think about what to teach, and without writing anything, they go to in fact, practice it. Never these types of things appear in the conversation, actually. Go. Cook, 1989, paragraph, the new paragraph on page 28, line 2. Cook, 1989, page 51, says that talk may be classed as a conversation when there's a kind of talk. Is it a kind of conversation? Well, yes, if there are these 5 things with the conversation or with the talk. Number 1, it is not primarily necessitated by a particular task. We don't want to have any kind of task. You remember task-based teaching, task-based learning, task-based, in fact, things like that. So there is no such a kind of task. 2, any unequal power of participants is partially suspended. So in the teacher-student exchange, there is one person who is up, and there are other students who are down. Well, the teacher has got power over all these children. Okay? Now, we do not have unequal power here. The powerful teacher and not so powerful students. Okay? So it says, number 2, that any unequal power of participants is partially suspended. In a conversation, most often one part of the conversation is not upper and the other people lower in their rank. Okay? Friends they have got the same types of, in fact, authority over each other. So if you actually order your friends, it means that your friend can order you. If you have a suggestion for your friend, a friend again can have a suggestion for you. So because you are friends, it is okay. But you cannot, as a teacher, as a student, you cannot order a teacher. You cannot order a teacher. Just do this way. Just do that way. So number 2 is something like this. So it is partially suspended, okay? Avoid it. Number 3, the number of participants is small. What does it mean? It means that, well, 2 guys, 3 guys took to each other. But in the classroom, there is one teacher, a group of students. Okay? So the number of participants in a real conversation is small. Number 4, turns are quite short. Okay? So if I actually say something for a minute, finally you stop and let my my friend actually talk. And when he is done, I actually continue saying something else. Turns are in fact quite short. But in a teacher exchange, for the exchange structure, it is like this. That, for example, the teacher is like talking and talking for 90 minutes. And the students only can ask a few questions inside this 90 minutes of talk. It's like this. 90 minutes of talk by the teacher, and sometimes the students are allowed to ask their questions. Okay? Number 5. Talk is primarily for the participants, not for an outside audience. So, I am talking to you and you're talking to me, and well, this is something like this in the conversation analysis. But actually, see, my teaching is done in an office, offline. For those guys miles away, tens of miles away, tens of kilometers away, well, more than that. Let's say 100 miles away from, or 1,000 miles away from, 1,000 miles away from the central part of Iran. Okay, it's like this. Or 1,500 kilometers away from the central part of Iran. Well, actually, about 900 kilometers is something like the beginning of Iraq. And Iraq is a big country. And the students are like this. So, talk is primarily for the participants, not for outside audience. I am actually talking to the audience outside Iran. Why? Because my, in fact, framework of teaching, as you see, all frameworks of teaching are exchange structure, but not real conversations. Okay? That's why we say things like that. So, below it, it actually talks about bad examples of conversation analysis, and the exchange structures are considered to be not acceptable here. Okay, exchange structure and teacher-student exchange, or like, let's say, doctor-patient interviews or TV quiz shows are actually not good examples of conversations. Okay, so these are the things that we actually talk about conversation. Now, if we actually go to the end of page 28, our beginning of page 29, we actually go to see what we see in our conversation, or a CA approach, conversation analysis approach. So let us continue with it on my next clip shortly. Thank you very much.